Step inside the cab, where every turn leads deeper into the unknown. In the invisible passenger, follow James Mercer, a taxi driver, haunted by guilt, memories, and the chilling presence of passengers who were never meant to ride. This is a horror story like no other, haunting, surreal, and unforgettable. Buckle up, your final fare awaits. Chapter 1. The Fare That Wasn't There. Rain pelted the windshield in a ceaseless rhythm, the wipers screeching back and forth like a metronome gone mad. Streetlights cast long, quivering shadows on the slick pavement, and every turn of the wheel felt like descending further into a dream too vivid to be real. James Mercer, a cab driver of 15 years, tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his eyes flitted between the road and the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty back seat. But he couldn't shake the feeling. That feeling, it had started an hour ago, around 11:47 p.m., when he accepted a ride request from a number with no caller ID. No name, no photo. The pickup location? A quiet side street near the edge of town, right beside the old train depot that had been abandoned since the fire in 1982. Something about the request had felt wrong. But money was money, and James had driven through worse places. He pulled up beside the curb, headlights illuminating nothing but an overgrown sidewalk and a rusted sign that once read Fallows Station. There was no one waiting. James frowned and leaned across the seat to crank down the passenger window. The rain came in sideways. "Hello?" he called into the night. The word was quickly swallowed by the downpour. Then he felt it. The weight, as if someone had just gotten into the passenger seat. Thump! His heart jumped. James whipped his head around, but the seat beside him was empty. Yet the air seemed different, heavier, colder. A faint smell of damp earth and something coppery, like rust or blood. "You all right, buddy?" he asked aloud, his voice thin and shaky. No answer. The screen on his dash flickered. A destination had been entered. Drop-off. Hawthorne Cemetery. James blinked. That cemetery hadn't been used in over 20 years. Most people didn't even know it existed anymore. His fingers hovered over the cancel button. Click! A sound from the back. Like the faint snap of fingers, he stared into the rear-view mirror again. Still nothing. "Screw this," he muttered, shifting the cab into drive. The cab trundled through winding, empty streets. James couldn't escape the silence that followed him. The city, though soaked and wind-ravaged, was oddly devoid of its usual night noises. No honking, no sirens, no chatter from late-night drunks. Only the whisper of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional creak from the suspension. Creak. It came again, louder this time. He glanced at the rear view. Still nothing. He tried to laugh it off. "It's just an old car. Needs work. Yeah, that's all." But then came the breathing, soft, measured, just behind his right ear. James froze. His eyes darted to the mirror. Nothing. He reached to turn on the dome light, but it fizzled and died with a brittle pop. Now he was sweating. The cold air inside the cab seemed to suck the heat from his bones. Goosebumps crawled across his arms like insects. His phone buzzed. A message. Do not stop the car. No number. Just the words, glowing white on black. He nearly dropped the phone. Who the hell is this? No answer. Just as he was about to pull over, the cab's radio blared on, full volume. Cranking black static. Screaming. The sound of dozens of voices crying out, overlapping. He took us. Don't let it in. You were supposed to die too. James slammed his palm against the dial, but it wouldn't turn off. The noise clawed at his ears, at his sanity. Then silence, just like that. And the only sound left was the rhythmic beat of rain and his own ragged breathing. He looked up. They were there. Handprints. Small, pale handprints on the inside of the windshield, dozens of them. As if children had been trying to claw their way out from inside the glass. He swerved. Tires screamed. Yee! He nearly slammed into a streetlight, but corrected just in time. James was shaking now, fingers white against the steering wheel. This isn't real. This isn't real. But he couldn't stop. The cab wouldn't stop. The gas pedal seemed stuck, and every time he tried the brake, the engine howled in protest. Roar! Like something alive. The city peeled away behind him, and the world outside grew darker. Trees lined the road, twisted and skeletal. The rain had turned to mist. Thick, heavy mist that seemed to move of its own accord. Finally, the gates appeared. Hawthorne Cemetery. Oh. Black iron bars, rusted and crooked, loomed out of the fog. The cab rolled to a stop on its own. James tried to put it in reverse. The stick wouldn't budge. Click. That sound again. A door opening. He looked. The passenger door was ajar, gently swinging. No one had gotten out or in. James stepped out into the cold, mud squelching beneath his boots. The cemetery lay silent before him. Rows of leaning headstones, barely visible through the mist. Then came the scream, "James!" It tore through the night like a jagged blade, high-pitched, feminine, familiar. His blood turned to ice. Karen? His wife, dead 5 years. He backed away toward the cab, but the fog thickened, swallowing the car whole. He could barely make out its shape now. More voices joined hers, echoing from every grave. "James, come with us. You left us behind. You were meant to die with us." Suddenly, the headstones began to tremble. Thump, 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 as if something underneath wanted out. James ran. He didn't care where, just away. Branches snapped around him, footsteps and laughter, childlike and shrill. Hee. Something brushed his shoulder. He turned and saw them, eyes glowing faintly blue in the fog, watching, waiting, and a voice right next to his ear. "See you next ride, James." The world spun. Everything went black. He awoke in his cab, parked outside his apartment. Dry, clean, radio off, no mud on his boots. But the passenger seat was wet. And there, in the rearview mirror, hung a single pale handprint. James didn't drive the rest of the week. But at exactly 11:47 p.m. the next Friday, his cab turned on, all by itself. Chapter 2: Rearview Reflections. The rain had stopped, but the sky still sagged with clouds that looked like they were mourning something unseen. James Mercer sat behind the wheel of his cab, staring blankly at the dashboard. The keys weren't in the ignition, yet the clock ticked. 11:47 p.m. Again. Every night since that ride his cab had turned on at exactly that time. No key, no movement, just the low, quiet hum of an engine that had no business running. And always the same chill in the air, like something sitting just behind him, breathing slowly. He tried to shake it, told himself it was stress, trauma. A hallucination brought on by years of loneliness and caffeine. But that didn't explain the handprint. It was still there, smudged across the rearview mirror, faint but undeniable. A single pale mark, too small to be an adult's, too detailed to be imagined. James had tried wiping it off, scrubbing it with cleaner, even replacing the mirror. It came back, every time. On the 7th night, he couldn't stay inside anymore. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in with whispers he couldn't locate. Every surface reflected things that weren't there, a movement just out of frame, a flicker of white at the edge of the television screen, a reflection of someone standing behind him, gone when he turned. He fled, back into the cab. The engine purred the moment he touched the door. James didn't even start it. It started for him. The radio dial spun on its own, pausing at 99.6 FM, the frequency he'd never used. Static. And then a voice. Not through the speakers, but inside the cab. Soft, female, echoing. "Look behind you, James." Click. His hazard lights blinked once. The sound of the relay was unnaturally loud. Click. Dot, dot. Click. His breath caught. Slowly, against every screaming instinct, he looked into the rearview mirror and saw himself. But he wasn't alone. Over his shoulder, in the reflection, stood a girl. Young, long black hair hung damp across her face. Her mouth hung slightly open, lips trembling, eyes wide, terrified. He spun around, nothing. The back seat was empty. When he looked back into the mirror, so was the reflection. For a long time, he just sat there. The only sound, the tick-tick-tick of the hazard lights. But something was off. The city beyond the windshield had shifted. The street lamps were out. The buildings looked older. Weathered, almost like ruins. And the air, visible somehow, shimmered like heat waves even in the cold. Tick, tick, tick. A knock jolted him. Tap, tap, tap. From the passenger window, James turned. A man stood there, soaking wet, dressed in an outdated train conductor's uniform mottled with ash and soot. His eyes were black voids. "Fallow Station," the man said in a rasping whisper. "I need to go back." James's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but only managed a croak. "What? What do you mean?" The man pointed at the mirror. "You see them now. They want you to remember." He vanished. Not walked away, not faded, vanished. Gone in the blink of an eye. James clutched the steering wheel. His knuckles went white. The mirror shimmered again. The reflection changed. He wasn't in his cab anymore. He was watching a scene unfold as if the mirror were a window. A flash of orange light, a fire, screens, smoke curling through an old train depot. Children were crying. A woman screamed his name. "James, get them out, please!" And there he was, a younger James, standing at the depot's edge, frozen, watching. Then turning away, running, James recoiled from the mirror, shaking his head. No, I wasn't there. I didn't." The voices returned, louder this time, filling the cab. "You left us. He watched us burn. He promised he'd come back." Bang! The glove compartment slammed open on its own, scattering old receipts and a small blackened train ticket. The words printed on it read, "Admit 1, follow station departure, 11:47 p.m." James grabbed the ticket. It felt warm, alive. From the mirror, the girl's voice returned. "It wasn't your fault until you forgot us." He felt tears sting his eyes. "Who are you?" But he knew her name, her face. A memory long buried. Lillian. She had been one of the kids at the community center. Back when James volunteered before the fire. She'd been quiet, kind, always reading ghost stories. He had promised to come back and give her a ride home, but he never did. He'd been drunk. He'd lied. Now the back seat was full, not with bodies, but with presence. The air shimmered with whispers. Tiny voices filled the space, murmuring, giggling, sobbing. The rearview mirror trembled. James touched it, and the world inverted. He was back at the depot, not in memory really there, standing on scorched ground. The sky above was gray and writhing with clouds. Ash drifted like snow. A train whistle blew in the distance. He turned. A ghostly locomotive approached, wheels screaming across rusted tracks. Chick, chick, chick! It screeched to a halt. Doors opened with a hiss. Children stepped off. Translucent, ash-covered, silent. Then Lillian. She looked at him, her face calm. "You came back!" James tried to speak, but his throat burned. "I'm sorry," he managed. She nodded. "It's not too late, but you have to see." "See what?" Lillian pointed. The depot began to rebuild itself in reverse, like a video rewinding. The fire sucked back into the walls. Screams became laughter. Light returned to dim bulbs overhead, and then James saw himself again. Younger, smiling, handing out juice boxes, reading ghost stories. He had been happy. Then the image cracked. A shriek tore the vision apart. "He's still lying!" A monstrous face burst through the scene, all teeth and burning eyes. James screamed. Back in the cab, heart pounding. His phone buzzed. A message. "Tonight, drive to where it ended." Another message followed. "Or they'll come for you." The rear-view mirror showed nothing. Then, one child, standing in the street behind him, staring, silent. James put the cab in drive. Rain began again, but it wasn't water. It was ash, falling gently from a sky that had forgotten how to weep. And in the mirror they waited, row after row of small, patient faces. as James turned the wheel and followed the road back to where it all began. Chapter 3. Voices in the Static. The ash had stopped falling, but the silence it left behind was heavier than before. James Mercer gripped the steering wheel with clammy hands, eyes locked on the road ahead, though the fog had thickened to the point where he could barely see beyond the hood. Every few seconds, his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those pale, watchful faces staring back. Tonight, the cab felt smaller. The space inside constricted with every breath he took, like the air was being slowly squeezed from the cabin by something unseen. 11:47 p.m. The dashboard clock flickered, then froze. James didn't touch a thing. The radio turned on by itself. A shrill wave of static burst through the speakers, so loud it made James wince and press his hands to his ears. Then, beneath the noise, came something else. Whispers, voices trying to claw their way through the static. "Don't stop. He's listening. James, why didn't you save us?" A cold sweat slid down the back of his neck. "Who's there?" he shouted over the noise. The static halted abruptly. Then a clear voice broke through. "Karen." James's stomach dropped. His wife's name, spoken in her voice, soft, pleading, full of the pain he hadn't heard since the night she died. "Karen?" he whispered. Silence. The voice returned, sharper now, edged with something wrong. "Why didn't you pick up the phone, James?" His hands trembled. I didn't know it was you. I didn't think—" "You never think. You left me to die. Just like them." Suddenly, the static surged again. The cab trembled like something massive had landed on its roof. A deep, groaning creak filled the cabin, metal bending under pressure. Thump, thump from the trunk. James jolted in his seat. He turned to look over his shoulder, but the back seat was still empty. Still, too still. A cold breath brushed the side of his neck. He gasped, twisting forward. The windshield fogged over. On the glass, letters began to form, written from the inside as though by a finger made of ice. TURNTOFF. James reached for the radio. His hand froze inches away, because now, through the static, came the sound of sobbing. Childlike, fragile. He pressed the volume dial. The sound grew louder. "It hurts, James. It burns. Why did you run? Why didn't you help us?" The cab's lights flickered. One by one, the buttons on the dashboard began to depress themselves. Click, click, click. Hazards, defroster. High beams. The cab was no longer under his control. He slammed the car into park and bolted out, breath steaming in the night air. The silence outside was thicker than the fog. It felt like sound itself had been swallowed. But the static continued, from inside the cab. James circled around to the trunk. The metal was cold to the touch. He hesitated, then lifted it open. Nothing. Just the spare tire, jumper cables, and an old, soot-covered teddy bear. He hadn't seen it in years. Lillian's bear. He picked it up. The moment he touched it, the world around him warped. The fog pulsed. Time slowed. The bear was warm, like it had just been held. Then screech! A high-pitched scream tore through the night. James dropped the bear and stumbled back, clutching his ears. The sound wasn't just loud, it was inside his skull. He fell to his knees, vision swimming. The fog moved in, forming shapes, suggestions of faces and limbs. Shadows ran across the street, too fast to be human. And then, bang, 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 fists pounded the windows of the cab from the inside. James crawled toward the driver's side, heart pounding. He opened the door slowly. Silence again. The bear sat on the driver's seat. Its glassy eyes stared at him. He picked it up again. The radio whispered. He locked the doors, Lillian. He never came back. We waited until the smoke came in, until the fire started talking. It told us his name. James's breath caught. "What fire?" he rasped. A growl answered him. Low, deep, inhuman, it vibrated through the floorboards, through his bones. "The one you gave us!" The cab's windows shattered all at once. Crash! 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 James covered his face, glass slicing his arms. The static from the radio grew into a cyclone of voices. "James Mercer is guilty. He ran. He left us. Burn him!" The bear burst into flames. James screamed, tossing it into the passenger seat, which caught fire immediately. The flames spread unnaturally fast, licking the ceiling in seconds. He reached for the door. Locked. He pounded the glass. "Let me out!" The rearview mirror reflected a scene behind him, not of the cab, but of the depot, burning. Children trapped behind barred windows, Lillian among them. Her eyes met his, and she said calmly, "You still have time." He blacked out. James awoke lying on the ground in front of his apartment. His cab sat parked a few feet away, intact. No flames, no shattered windows, no bear. But the radio was still on, whispering. 3 nights left. 2. Chapter 4. Drop off at the cemetery gate. The fog had a mind of its own. It didn't roll, it slithered. Across pavement, over streetlights, through the gaps and alleyways, like a ghost with 1,000 hands. James Mercer watched it coil around the corners of his windshield, brushing the glass with long, deliberate tendrils. The cab had driven itself again. No map, no destination typed in. Just the familiar hum of the engine and the chill in his chest that told him he wasn't in control. He didn't even ask where they were going anymore, because he already knew. Ahead, through the pale curtain of fog, the twisted gates of Hawthorne Cemetery loomed like broken teeth. Black iron, rusted and bent, half swallowed by ivy and time. The cab rolled to a stop just outside the entrance, and for the first time that night, the engine cut itself. Click. Total silence. No birds. No wind. Not even the usual city hum. Just the sound of his own breath and the slow, dreadful beat of his heart. James opened the door. Creak! The hinge screamed like a wounded animal. He stepped out onto wet gravel, his boots crunching with every step toward the gate. A faint sound drifted from within the graveyard, distant, delicate, a music box, the haunting tinkle of a melody he couldn't quite place. The tune dipped and faltered, as though warped by time or memory. It pulled him forward. He pushed open the gate. Eek! It groaned like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the cemetery was a maze of leaning headstones, gnarled trees, and mausoleums swallowed by decay. The air smelled of wet earth and something older. Something like forgotten bones. The music grew louder. He followed it. Each step deeper into the cemetery made the world around him more distant. The fog became thicker, but it didn't muffle sound, it carried it. Whispers. James, we waited. You promised. The voices echoed from behind headstones, from beneath the earth. He passed a small angel statue, its eyes hollowed, hands outstretched as if pleading. Below it, the name was worn away by rain. A crow shrieked. Craw! James spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing. Then, a child standing between the graves, pale, eyes dark, wearing a dress from another era. Lillian? He whispered. She didn't move. She pointed to the far end of the cemetery, where a small hill rose with a single solitary crypt at its crown. James swallowed hard and began walking. As he approached, the wind picked up, not cold, but sharp. Each gust carried fragments of voices, some pleading, some accusing. Liar, you left us to burn. We called for you. You let her die. When he reached the crypt, the doors opened without a sound. Inside, it was black, pure, suffocating darkness. But that damn melody was louder now, echoing from deep within. Ting, 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 ting. James hesitated, then stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. Bang! He flinched. The darkness swallowed everything. His breath became shallow, desperate. Then the room lit up in short, violent flashes. Flash! He stood in the death-o again, fire licking the walls. Flash! Karen, his wife, staring at him from the doorway, blood trailing down her temple. Flash! Children screaming, pounding on locked doors. Flash! His own reflection, eyes black, mouth wide, laughing. James screamed. The music box shattered, and the room went still. Then came the breathing. Slow, wet, right next to his ear. He turned and saw nothing. But he wasn't alone. He felt fingers, small, cold, grip his wrist. Dozens of them. Children. Hands reached from the walls, from the floor, clutching at him, dragging him down. He thrashed, kicking, screaming, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave. I didn't mean it. A voice broke through the chaos. Lillian's, clear, sad. You didn't forget. You ran. James was pulled to the floor, into darkness, into earth, into memory. When he woke, he was lying on top of a grave. His own. James Mercer, 1978-2007. He never came back. He stumbled back, panting, clawing at the soil like it would tell him it was a joke. But the stone didn't change, and behind him stood Lillian. Not angry, just tired. You can still help us, she said, but you have to go back. To where? He asked. She pointed again. The cab parked just outside the gate, engine purring, headlights cutting through the mist. Waiting. James stood, numb, lost, and walked back to it. As he opened the door, the radio whispered, 2 nights left. Chapter 5. Unseen Passenger, seen pain. James Mercer had stopped trying to understand. The rules no longer made sense. Sleep didn't come. Mirrors whispered. The cab obeyed no master but itself. The line between the living and the dead had frayed, and now it was bleeding. He hadn't gone home since the night at Hawthorne Cemetery. The memory of his own name etched in granite haunted his every blink. His own death, staring back at him from that tombstone, felt both metaphorical and all too literal. Since then, James existed in the in-between, breathing, thinking, hurting, but not really alive. Now, it was night again. And the cab door opened on its own. Creak! A gust of cold air poured from within. James got in. The dashboard flickered to life. The digital clock blinked once, 11:47 p.m., and froze. The engine rumbled, but this time the radio was silent. Instead, James heard breathing right behind him. He turned, slowly. The back seat was empty, but not. The cushions had sunk. Imprints pressed into the fabric, as though someone were sitting there, watching him, waiting. He looked into the rearview mirror, and finally he saw it. Not a face, not fully, but a distortion, like a ripple in space, barely visible. A presence that bent light around itself. It moved when he moved, shifted when he shifted. It breathed when he breathed. James whispered, "What are you?" The cab replied with a sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Fingernails dragging across the inside of the roof. He gritted his teeth. Then came the pressure. His chest tightened. A heavy, invisible weight pressed into him, like the seatbelt had wrapped itself around his lungs. The cab filled with the metallic scent of rusted iron and rot. James gasped for air, and the whisper returned. "We feel everything you forget." He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The rearview mirror cracked. Crick, crack! Thin lines crawled across its surface, webbing outward from the center like frost. And in each shard, James saw a different version of himself. One holding a bottle, eyes red, watching the depot burn. One standing over Karen's lifeless body, hands stained. One driving into a tunnel with no end, grinning madly. All of them whispered in unison, "You let us die." The cab peeled itself away from the curb. James didn't touch the wheel. It drove through the empty streets, headlights illuminating nothing but fog and flickering shadows. The city had fallen silent again. No lights in the buildings. No people on the sidewalks, just the hum of tires over asphalt. And then the pain started, sudden, sharp, like a needle piercing his spine. He screamed, "Ah!" But the cab didn't stop. The windshield fogged again. This time, bloody handprints smeared across the inside. Slap, slap, slap. Then fingernails scraped down the glass. Yee! James writhed in his seat, clutching his sides. The pain was inside him now, like something gnawing its way up from within. The radio flared to life. Sss! Crack! Crack! Then a voice. "Do you remember what it felt like? To burn?" A sound followed. the roar of fire. The screams of children, the thud of fists against locked doors. James screamed again, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know." "But you did." The cab turned on its own, tires squealing. Scream! They were back at the depot. Or what was left of it. Charred remains. A black skeleton of wood and metal. The smell of ash still lingered, as if the fire had never really gone out. James stepped out of the cab. The air was too still, too wrong. And behind him, the back door opened. Click! The unseen passenger had disembarked. James turned and saw the tracks. Footprints, bloody, small, leading toward the ruins. He followed. Inside, time unraveled. The moment he stepped through the broken threshold, the depot breathed. The walls groaned. A whistle blew in the distance, and the voices returned. "It's not over. You owe us more. You owe her." He stumbled through warped corridors, memories replaying in fragments around him. Children reading books, Karen laughing, fire creeping under doors. Then came the worst sound of all, the silence that followed the screams. James collapsed to his knees, hands over his ears. "No more, please, I'll do anything." A single voice spoke now. "Lillian, then feel what we felt." The heat returned. The floor glowed orange. Flames erupted around him, but they didn't burn the wood. They burned him. His flesh, his memories, his soul. Every regret ignited. Every lie blistered. He screamed until his voice broke. And still it wasn't enough. Until finally the fire stopped. Smoke curled in the air. James lay on the floor, shaking, skin unburnt, but body shattered. Lillian stood above him, no longer a child, now a girl of ash and sorrow. "I see you now," she said. James looked up at her, tears mingling with soot. "I deserve this." She nodded, "But it's not over." She pointed behind him, to the cab. Parked where it shouldn't be, doors open, waiting, and the radio whispered, "One night left, ... Chapter 6, The Ledger of the Dead. James Mercer stood at the edge of what remained of the depot, skin damp with sweat and ash, his ears still ringing with the screams of children long gone. The cab waited behind him, silent and motionless, an open mouth ready to consume again. The wind stirred, and with it came a new sound. Flip, paper turning. Flip, flip, flip. Somewhere within the ruins, pages turned of their own accord, rhythmic and slow. James turned toward the sound. Drawn like a moth to flame, his steps crunching on burnt glass and broken floorboards. Each footstep was met with a low creak from the wood beneath, echoing like the floor was trying to whisper his name. Creak, creak, James. He passed what was once the children's reading corner, now a grave of soot and splintered furniture. In the far corner, beyond a partially collapsed wall, the pages continued to flutter. Flip, flip. Then they stopped. He stepped into a hollowed room, a forgotten office maybe. The walls had buckled in the fire, blackened beyond recognition, but in the center of the room sat a desk, untouched by flame, untouched by time. Upon it, A massive book, bound in leather the color of dried blood. The cover bore no title, only a handprint scorched into its surface. Small, child-sized, James approached it slowly, like it might explode if touched too fast. As he neared, the book pulsed, thump, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, and the air grew colder. He reached for the cover. The moment his fingers made contact, the room plunged into shadow. The candle of his consciousness flickered, and the ledger opened. Inside were names, hundreds, each written in ink that shimmered like oil, undulating slightly as if still wet. Next to each name, a date, a place, and a single word: forgotten, ignored, abandoned. He flipped through slowly. Miriam Taylor, 1982, Fallow Station, trapped. Caleb Harrison, 1982, Fallow Station, cried. Karen Mercer, 2007, home. Waited. James's breath hitched. His wife. He ran a finger across her name. The page trembled under his touch. Then James Mercer, 2007, cab number 624. Denied. He stumbled back. "No," he whispered. "I'm not dead. I'm not." But the book pulsed again, and the pages turned on their own. Flip, 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 until they landed on a blank page. No name, just a black, ink-like splotch slowly expanding across the parchment. Then letters began to form. "Tonight, you choose the next name." James backed away, eyes wide. What does that mean? The book snapped shut. Slam! And all around him, voices rose from the floor. "You carry us! You drive us! You deliver us!" The air grew dense. Figures began to crawl from the walls. Shadows with faces. Faces with stories. Children, women, strangers, some familiar. Some strangers he had passed on streets, ignored in alleys, driven away from without a glance. James turned to run, but a figure blocked the doorway. Karen. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed with black tears. But her voice was gentle. "You were always going somewhere, James, but you never knew where." He whispered her name. She stepped forward. "There's a cost to ferrying the forgotten, a ledger to balance, a toll to pay." She reached out, and in her hand appeared a key, the same brass cab key he had used for 15 years, but now it pulsed with red light. "Take it," she said. "Finish the route." James didn't move. "You still don't understand?" she asked. Then the walls of the office peeled away, and they were back in the cab. James in the driver's seat, Karen beside him, and the back seat full. Children, elderly, lost souls. All watching him. Their faces flickered like candle flames in a dying wind. The radio buzzed. "Last route, last chance." Karen whispered, "You choose who rides, who stays, who goes." "Why me?" James asked. "Why me?" Karen looked at him, and for a moment there was no malice, just profound, soul-deep sorrow. "Because you saw us. Even when you ran, you saw." She faded. The key was in his hand. The cab doors locked, and the rear-view mirror reflected not the road, but the next page of the ledger. Blank. Waiting. And the voice returned. "Drive." Outside, the road stretched on into the dark, into judgment. into reckoning. James turned the ignition. Click! Vroom! The cab roared to life, and the voices in the back seat began to chant. Drive the dead, James, until your name fades. End. Chapter 7. The Route Never Taken. The cab didn't move forward so much as it slipped out of time, out of place, out of anything James Mercer could name. The city behind him dissolved like wet ink on paper. Even the stars blinked out above, one by one, until the sky became a blank canvas of midnight. He was alone, except he wasn't. The back seat breathed. Whispers bloomed like fungus in the silence, curling through the air in a chorus of unease. Left or right? He'll choose wrong. We always do. James tightened his grip on the wheel, the key still glowing faintly in the ignition. The headlights sliced through the nothingness, revealing a road not made of asphalt, but of bone-white stones, each one etched with names he didn't want to read. Ahead, the road split into 3 paths. No signs, no landmarks, just black fog curling between them. A voice crackled from the radio. Only one way leads back, but all ways go through. The cab idled, rumbling like a beast beneath him. James closed his eyes. Left, he whispered. The cab turned of its own accord. The moment the tires touched the left path, the air changed. Cold, bitter, electric. And then, thunk, thunk, thunk. Something hit the roof. He flinched, looked up. Thunk, thunk. The roof buckled. Danks formed above him as though invisible fists were slamming down. Then came the screaming. Let us out! No windows, no doors. It's still burning. Children's voices. Dozens, maybe more. James stomped on the brake. The cab didn't stop. The dashboard melted, the plastic sagging like flesh, the radio dripping with black ichor, and the rearview mirror began to bleed. Red rivulets ran down the glass, obscuring his reflection, but not the ones behind him. In the mirror, he saw the back seat full of passengers. No faces, only outlines, silhouettes of loss and pain. Their bodies flickered like damaged film. The radio warbled again. Turn back, turn back, turn back. James gritted his teeth. I can't! The cab screamed, a mechanical shriek, metal bending, tires skidding, horn blaring. It was the sound of a crash that hadn't happened yet. Then the fog parted. They entered a town with no name. The buildings leaned inward, collapsing toward the road like drunk mourners at a funeral. Lights flickered in shattered windows, casting skeletal shadows. Signs hung at odd angles, printed in languages James couldn't read, scratches, sigils, looping symbols that hurt to look at. A man stood in the center of the road. The cab stopped without instruction. James stared. The man's skin was gray, charred, his jaw unhinged, dangling crooked. One eye was missing. The other stared directly at James. Do you know me? The man gurgled. James shook his head. You hit me, September 2002. Rain, no lights, no brakes. Just a whisper of sorry before you drove away. James tried to deny it, tried to say anything, but his mouth was dry. The man reached forward. and pressed a bloody handprint to the hood of the cab. Sss! Smoke rose. The paint hissed and bubbled. The handprint burned into the metal like a brand. "You carry us now," the man said before crumbling into ash. The road resumed. More shadows crossed the path. Victims, strangers, people he didn't remember or tried not to. And they all left marks, handprints, scratches, scars. The cab was no longer yellow. It was black, charred, alive, and it wept. The air grew thick again. From the back seat came a new voice. Karen, but not the Karen he knew. This one sounded twisted, corrupted. "James, why are you still driving?" He looked into the mirror. Karen's face stared back, gaunt, gray, eyes black and endless. "You keep driving like it'll change the end, but it always ends the same." She leaned closer. "Burning, screaming, alone," James shouted. "I'm trying to fix it." The cab laughed, a long, mechanical wheeze, a dying engine trying to breathe. The wheel jerked. The cab veered off the road, screeching. Darkness swallowed everything. He awoke parked on a cliffside. Below, an endless abyss. Behind, the road vanished. The radio crackled. Last exit, no U-turns. A page turned in the ledger on the dashboard. Blank. Waiting. And a single name began to scrawl itself. James Mercer. He reached out, stopped. Karen sat beside him, human again. Silent, eyes full of tears. "You can stop now," she said. James whispered, "Will it be enough?" She didn't answer, but the passengers in the back seat were gone. The cab was empty. The mirror was clean. The road ahead lit up a single narrow bridge, suspended by nothing, leading into soft white light. No screams, no blood, just wind and quiet. James put the cab into gear and drove the route never taken. Chapter 8. Echoes of the Past Ride Along. The bridge had no end. James Mercer drove through a mist so thick it swallowed the headlights whole. The road below him made no sound, no rumble, no hum of tires against gravel, just the quiet exhale of a world undone. And still he drove. The cab's engine purred like it had never been damaged, never screamed, never burned. But James knew better. He felt it. This wasn't a journey of wheels and road. It was a procession of memory. A toll through time. And soon they began to appear, not with a door opening or a weight on the seat, but suddenly there, in the passenger seat, sat a boy, no older than 10. Pale, soaked from head to toe, water pooling on the cab floor. James's fingers gripped the wheel tight. "Do I know you?" The boy turned. His eyes were clouded, lips blue. "You drove past me." James's heart sank. "Where?" "Corner of Oak and Fifth. It was raining. I waved." He remembered, barely. A drenched kid standing on a street corner one stormy night. James had been off duty. Tired. He drove past, told himself someone else would stop. But no one did, the boy said. James swallowed. "I'm sorry." The boy looked away. "I died cold." Splash. Water flooded the cab floor. freezing. James's feet were submerged in seconds. Drip, drip, drip. The roof began to weep. Heavy droplets fell in slow rhythm, echoing like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, drip, thump. James blinked and the boy was gone, but the water remained. Next, a woman appeared in the back seat. She wore a red scarf, torn. Her hands trembled as she clutched a purse to her chest. James met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "I know you," he said. "You were supposed to wait," she replied. He did remember her. Picked her up from a downtown bar. She asked him to wait a moment while she ran inside to grab her phone. 5 minutes. He got impatient. Left. She'd gone back outside minutes later. The alley was dark. ... Someone had been waiting. James's voice broke. "I didn't know, I didn't think." "You never do." Knock, knock, knock. Her knuckles tapped on the window softly, but the sound echoed like a hammer to glass. Knock, knock. James turned. She was gone. A smear of red remained on the seat. Her scarf, twisted like a noose. The cab filled with fog again, thick and choking. Then came the laughter. Hee. A girl appeared in the rearview mirror, smiling wide, too wide, teeth sharp. James's blood turned to ice. "Lillian?" She nodded, but her smile didn't change. "Are we there yet?" she asked in a sing-song voice. "Where are we going?" "To the end," he whispered. "Is that where I find peace?" She giggled. "No, that's where you find truth." Screech! The cab jerked. Sparks erupted from the headlights as the mist parted. A street appeared. Familiar. James blinked. It was his childhood block. The houses looked the same, only older, rotting. Shadows moved behind curtains. Lights flickered in patterns. Then the cab slowed, on its own, parked outside a small blue house. His house. James stared. Heart pounding. "Why are we here?" Lillian's voice whispered from behind him. "Because your ghost never left." He stepped out. The air was dead, still. Not even the sound of crickets. The porch light flickered. Click, click, click. He climbed the steps. Each creaked like a scream. Creak! He opened the door. Inside, the house was filled with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that waits. He walked through the hallway. Photographs lined the wall. Only the faces were scratched out, except his. In every frame, his own eyes stared back at him, judging, empty, cold. He turned a corner and saw himself, a younger James, sitting on the living room couch, drunk, a bottle in hand, watching the news, eyes glazed. A fire was playing on the screen. The depot. James remembered. He had watched it, heard the sirens, knew exactly where it was, but he didn't move, didn't call, didn't help. The younger version didn't react to him until James whispered, "Why didn't you go?" Then the younger James turned, smiled, and said, "Because if you save them, who saves you?" The house shook. Pictures fell. The walls cracked, and the room filled with smoke. James ran. The hallway twisted, became longer, warped. Footsteps echoed behind him, not his own. Thump, thump, thump. He turned a corner and slammed into Karen. She caught him, held him, but her body was cold. "Are you ready now?" she asked. Tears ran down his face. "I think I've always been." She led him back outside. The cab was waiting. Karen opened the back door. "In this ride," she said, "you don't drive, you listen." He sat in the back. The cab began to move. Through fog, through fire, through memory. Passengers filled the seats, one by one. Each took a turn. Each told their story, their last day, their final fear, their moment of abandonment. And James listened, not as a driver, but as a witness. The road ahead shimmered. And the voice from the radio whispered, "One more ride, one more truth." Chapter 9. Destination Nowhere. The cab moved without destination. The road beneath it curved in impossible ways, looping, dipping, twisting into itself like a serpent devouring its own tail. Time had stopped functioning as James Mercer once understood it. The clock on the dashboard had melted into a warped smear, the numbers dancing in patterns that defied reason. Outside, there was no landscape, just black. Not the kind of black that comes with night, but the kind that feels alive, breathing, watching, judging. James sat in the back seat. He didn't remember switching places, but he hadn't been driving for a while now. The cab no longer needed a driver. It had become a vessel, and James, a passenger. The rear-view mirror showed no road, no driver, only him, endlessly reflected. The radio hissed. Then a voice. "Nowhere is where we all go, James, when the destination is too heavy to carry." James closed his eyes, but he still saw them. Faces behind his eyelids, screaming, burning, reaching. The cab slowed. No screech of brakes. No sound at all. Just stillness. James opened his eyes. The cab had stopped at a station. Not a building, not a place, just a platform floating in the void. Rusted, broken, covered in forgotten belongings, shoes, toys, half-burnt letters, and signs, all pointing in different directions, all reading the same word, nowhere. The door opened. Creak-yack! James stepped out. His boots clicked on the iron surface, echoing too loud, like the sound was trying to run away. In the center of the platform stood a payphone. It rang. Once, twice, a third time. James answered. "Hello?" Static. Then Karen's voice, faint, tired, echoing. "This is where you always wanted to go, isn't it?" he whispered. "No." Her voice sharpened. "Liar! You ran from everyone, from responsibility, from Cain, from love." The phone crackled, and then a cacophony erupted from the receiver. Children screaming, tires skidding, fire roaring, flesh searing. James dropped the phone. Clang! It dangled, swinging gently. Then the platform beneath him began to tremble. Thump, 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 as if something enormous moved below. James backed toward the cab, but it was gone. were placed by a door, ancient, wooden, cracked, and above it, carved in jagged letters, Truth. James didn't want to open it, but he had nowhere else to go. He grasped the handle. It burned. Sssss. He screamed, but didn't let go, and pulled. The door opened into a hallway of mirrors. Each one showed a different moment. James helping a homeless man. James screaming at Karen. James holding a bottle. James laughing with the kids. James driving away. James watching the depot burn. James saying nothing when it mattered most. The hallway pulsed with light, then darkness. Then came the sound, a rising, deafening scream. Not one voice, but all of them. All he had let down. All he had failed. Ah! James dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. Blood dripped from them, but the sound wouldn't stop. It became him, until he screamed with them. And then, nothing. He awoke on a bench, alone, somewhere new, somewhere too quiet. The air was gray. Fog curled like fingers across the ground. Ahead was a path. No signs, no road, just dirt. And at the end, a cab. His cab, pristine, idling, waiting. He walked to it, opened the door. No key was needed. The engine started with a soft purr. But there were no passengers. Only a note on the dashboard. You've reached nowhere. You may choose to go back, but not the same. James gripped the wheel. His hands didn't shake. The rearview mirror showed no ghosts. Only him, aged, broken, but present. He pressed the gas. The cab rolled forward, and the voice whispered one final time. One ride left, James. Make it count. Chapter 10. The Final Fare. The cab rolled through dawnless light, headlights cutting across a landscape that didn't exist on any map. The sky overhead was not black, not gray, but colorless, like old film, stripped of pigment. Beneath the wheels, the road had no texture, no resistance. It felt like driving across memory. James Mercer sat behind the wheel for what felt like forever, and maybe it was. The air inside the cab no longer stank of ash or blood or rot. It was clean. Still, peaceful. But James knew better than to trust silence. He checked the rearview mirror. No passengers. Yet. Then, ding, the old ride-hailing app pinged to life. A new fare. Pickup, 47th and Holloway. Name, Evelyn Harrow. James blinked. The name meant nothing to him. But the address, he remembered it. It was where he'd first started driving, before the depot, before the fire, before the guilt. James turned the wheel. The cab obeyed. The landscape began to shift, slowly. The nothingness around him pulled away, like a stage backdrop being dismantled. Buildings emerged, cracked brick, flickering street lamps, signs in crooked neon. It looked like a city pretending to be alive. At the corner of 47th and Holloway stood a woman, Evelyn Harrow. She wore a long black coat. Her eyes were sharp, but her face, sad, familiar in a way James couldn't place. She opened the door and stepped in without a word. "Where to?" he asked. Evelyn looked straight ahead, back. The cab moved, The city warped around them. Time flickered in window shadows moving backward, people walking in reverse. Music played from somewhere distant, distorted like a record left too long in the sun. Then Evelyn spoke. "I know who you are." James didn't respond. "I followed your name, through whispers, through fire, through static. Still, he said nothing. You ferry them, the forgotten, the broken, the lost." James finally met her eyes in the mirror. "But what are you?" she asked. He didn't know. He used to be a man. Now, a conduit, a consequence. They drove into the outskirts of the depot. But it was different now. Rebuilt, whole. Children's voices echoed inside. Laughter, music. No flames, no screams. Evelyn looked around. "Why here?" James whispered. "Because this is where I left them." She stepped out. James followed. Inside, the depot was bathed in warm light. The scent of old wood and crayons filled the air. Rows of children sat cross-legged on the floor, listening to a man read from a storybook. The man was James, but younger, happier, alive. Evelyn turned to him. "You could stay here, in the moment before it all went wrong." James looked at the children, at Lillian among them, at Karen standing by the door, watching with a gentle smile. He shook his head. "I don't deserve to." Evelyn studied him, then pointed to the cab. "Then take me to where they are." They drove again, through streets that collapsed behind them. Lights dying as they passed. Back to the cemetery gate. Back to the door carved with truth. Evelyn stepped out. Walked up to the threshold, but it didn't open. She turned to James. "Why won't it let me through?" "Because you haven't taken the ride." She frowned. "What ride?" James looked her in the eye. "The one I did." She got back in, and the cab changed. The windows turned black. The seats warped, as if made of breath and bone. The dashboard blinked. Last fare. Evelyn began to fade. Her skin turned to mist. Her face shimmered. And then Jane saw her clearly. She wasn't a stranger. She was one of them. One of the children he hadn't remembered. One he hadn't saved. Evelyn whispered, "I waited at the door." Tears slid down James's face. "I'm so sorry." She smiled and vanished. The cab door opened. The light outside had changed. Pure, golden. Beyond it, no fog, no fire, no screams. Only silence. True silence. Not the silence of punishment, but of peace. James looked at the dashboard. The ledger was gone. The keys glowed softly. The radio whispered. All fares complete. All names carried. James stepped out. The cab didn't vanish. It waited, but not for him. Someone else would drive now. He turned. Karen waited for him. Lillian stood beside her. He walked to them. No longer burning, no longer running, just walking home. Behind him, the cab drove off into the fog.